Hello, folks. I'd like to welcome you here this afternoon to discuss the SDGs, and we're going to have a look at the limitations and perhaps a critique of the SDGs as a framework. Today I have Dr. Mark Garavan joining us from the ATU in Castlebar. We're going to discuss the limitations to the SDGs. So, hello, Mark.
John, how are you?
I'm good. So, the SDGs are a very broad framework. What are your thoughts on the SDGs in general, and what hope do you think the SDGs offer for society going forward in general?
I think the first thing to say is they're very important. So it's easy to get too quickly into critiquing. I think we have to acknowledge, firstly, the SDGs as an achievement. So they're an achievement of global solidarity. I think that would be the first thing to say. Yeah. It's very rare in the fraught world we live in with all of the various conflicts and geopolitical tensions to get most countries on the planet agreeing about anything. So that there's an agreement regarding these particular goals, that there are 17 things that pretty much every country is signed up to and at least aspires to, or at least makes a genuflection towards. That's a really good thing in a world of great division and great conflict. So that's the first thing. And I don't think we should easily dismiss that or not give it enough attention. So that's actually quite important. Now, they did replace the Millennium Goals. So they're a bit sharper and they're a bit more focused. And they do give headline objectives. So in fairness to them, a second thing we should say is they're not designed to be highly developed and articulated kind of pathways, though there has been a lot of elaboration under each of the goals. So they are giving you the headline targets that the global community should be aiming towards. So again, that's a really good thing. Another good thing is they recognize that the problems we're facing are interconnected, that they're all linked together. So again, in the past, we may have had a small problem where particular advocacy groups and NGOs and indeed governments were a little bit siloed in the sense that they would concentrate on one specific issue. So they might be about poverty reduction, or they might be about increasing peace or human rights or gender equality, or then the environmental stuff. And the temptation then would be to think that your issue is the number one issue and the most important one, and that's the one that we have to deal with. So I think the other thing about the SDGs in their favor is they bring them all together. And they say that they're all connected up. And that if you're going to address any one of them, you really need to pay attention to all of them because they all interact with each other. So that's a third really positive thing about them. There's a fourth positive thing. So we'll start on all these positive sides of it. The fourth positive thing is the fact that it inserts the term sustainability into their title. And this acts as a really critical corrective to a big problem that we now know we have, which is the uncritical notion around the concept of development. So you can almost think of the history of the modern world as being a trajectory of development, So again, there's a big debate when you begin that. Let's not go there. Let's just go with the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, and all of the assumptions of, if like, Western humanism, that Western humanity in particular had an elevated perspective on things. It had developed science and technology and rationality. And using these means, it would drive progress, firstly in Europe and then globally. And that this progress was seen as something uncritical. It was obvious what it would be. It would be roads and railways and electricity and factories and chimney and burning fuel and energy and gadgets and technology and stuff. And that this was so obviously good that the objective was to spread it globally and everyone would have it. And often this whole concern with development itself got caught up in justifications of things like colonialism and the exploitation of the rest of the world, because you could, while you were colonizing a country and literally taking it over and extracting resources from it, you could tell yourself this kind of justificatory story, well, we are bringing development and we are bringing civilization in some way. So it's an extremely colonial idea. So development, as it has been articulated mostly during the 19th century, but a good part of the 20th century as well, was based on this Western assumption that it was obvious what that was. And it also allowed for a Western justification for colonialism and exploitation. So it's a very troubling concept. And so when we use the word development, we have to be very careful of it. So again, the fourth thing I'm saying that's potentially positive about the SDGs is it qualifies that notion of development by linking it in with sustainability. So it creates at a minimum a break point on development, and it creates at a minimum a kind of corrective to uncritical notions of development, and makes development have to integrate with the idea of sustainability. And while that would have been a very obtuse and abstract argument in the 20th century, for us poor creatures of the 21st century, this is a very real issue. Because what we are seeing, we are beginning to live through the end point of the development project. Or putting it a different way, we're beginning to live through the downside of uncritical development in the old 19th century, 20th century model. And we're seeing that development, as pursued primarily by the West, is leading to huge problems globally. And we're hitting the limits of those problems. So the SDGs at least bundle these two concepts together, and then at least create headline pathways, maybe, out of it. So they're kind of four, I mean, as a first shot in answer to you, they're kind of four positive things about the SDGs that we should acknowledge and not be too glib about getting too quickly into critiquing them. They're actually quite important things.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, no, I think they are a really positive development. Using another term or another meaning for the word development.
Yeah.
So next, I'll ask you maybe about what hope do you think that they bring? I mean, they are a great framework. Do you, you know, how hopeful are you about them, or what hope do you think they bring? What can we do to make them, you know, a reality, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, their hope lies in, well, in firstly, those four things. So those four things are quite significant achievements. The hope is in that they set an aspiration for the global community. Because imagine if we did wake up in a sustainable world. That would be a really good thing. So imagine if we did, let's start with number one, no poverty. So let's imagine we woke up in a world where there was literally no poverty. Now that would be quite something. So that is the good thing. Again, the hope is that you would actually achieve it. Imagine if we did wake up in a world where our energy systems were entirely sustainable. That would be a really good thing. Imagine if we lived in a world where there was gender equality and access to education, and where there were strong, robust civic institutions that animated all societies. So the aspiration of the SDGs is really positive. And who could disagree with most of them? I mean, they're very positive, and they orient communities around the world in a direction that would, we think, be positive for everybody. So that's their great value. Now, we'll talk a bit later about the problems with the SDGs in terms of some inbuilt contradictions within them. And that's really a fatal problem for some of them. And some of the things may be left out as well. But as an aspiration, they're really good. Now, that all the governments pretty much have signed up to them makes the governments at least officially accountable for the development of the SDGs. So at least at some official level, they are meant to be engaged in bringing about the SDGs. So that can hold governments to account, at least in societies that are reasonably democratic. So that's a good thing as well. It can also act as a kind of a mobilizing element for civic society and NGOs, because again, NGOs and civic society and citizens groups and community groups can mobilize themselves around the achievement of the SDGs, and they can legitimately say this is an agreed global objective and this is what we want. So if I'm arguing that I want to eradicate poverty, then I can say this is SDG number 1. This is what you're all committed to. So my little NGO or my little community group or my little collective action project is trying to do this. So I'm acting consistently with what is an agreed global aspiration. So you can't critique me or attack me for doing it, because I'm doing what everyone says we want to achieve. So they're all the good sides of it. And insofar as we have to have hope, then the hope is that they can act as kind of organizing principles or mobilizing principles for all of that civic community to do the work. Now, if you're asking me a different question, whether I think this will happen, that's a different question, because now we get into the murky world of reality and politics and the contradictions at the heart of the SDGs. which make their delivery much more challenging. So again, I mean, I don't know what you think, John. It's not, I don't want to be the one who's like, I've got all the, I'm just thinking aloud as soon as you're asking me, but you know, so you know, I don't know what you think about that, but you know, we can go into the, if you like, that other side of the SDGs if you want, but maybe you want to sit with this one just for a moment or two. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think when you take the SDGs as a framework, they provide an excellent opportunity to allow people to share a vision and a goal, and they provide a framework so that people can all, as you say, work towards the same end. That is a very unifying trait. That is a very beneficial aspect of the SDGs. And I think, as you mentioned earlier on, it's the first time, like 193 governments have signed up for this. So you know, it's global, and it obviously has implications in all countries and nationalities.